Climb into a farmhouse attic on a July afternoon, and the heat does not feel like weather. It feels like standing next to a wood stove that is somehow also the ceiling. Your shirt is wet before you've climbed past the top rung of the ladder. Put a hand flat against the underside of the roof deck, and you will pull it back fast, because that plywood can sit well past 130 degrees, while the thermometer outside says 90. And every hour it sits up there cooking, some of that heat is radiating straight down through your insulation into the bedroom below, the same bedroom that was perfectly comfortable back in January. Most people either run the air conditioner harder or call a roofer, and a roofer will talk to you about shingles and decking and a bill with a lot of zeros on it. Old northern farmhouse families dealt with this a different way, and the fix costs about $180 for an average attic, and takes an afternoon with a staple gun. I want to show you what it actually is, what the real research says it does, and why it is almost never the first thing a contractor brings up. Here is the mechanism, and it matters that you understand it, because it is not the same thing as insulation. When sunlight hits your roof, the shingles and the wood deck underneath them heat up, and that hot roof deck then radiates heat downward, the same way you can feel heat radiating off a wood stove without touching it. Insulation bats in your attic floor slow down heat that is conducting or convecting through them, but radiant heat behaves differently. It travels in a straight line until it hits something, and what it usually hits first is the top surface of your insulation, which absorbs it and slowly lets it soak through anyway. A radiant barrier is a sheet of foil, sometimes plain aluminum, sometimes a foil-faced material, installed so it faces an open-air gap, usually stapled to the underside of the roof rafters. It does not stop heat by slowing it down. It reflects it the way a mirror reflects light, bouncing roughly 90 to 97% of that radiant heat straight back toward the roof deck, instead of letting it soak into your attic. Oak Ridge National Laboratory tested this directly, using a large-scale climate simulator built to reproduce real summer attic conditions. And a radiant barrier stapled to the underside of the rafters cut the heat flow through the attic floor by close to half, compared to an attic with no barrier at all. Now here is the part I want to be straight with you about, because it is where a lot of videos on this exact topic stop being honest. The Department of Energy's own guidance says radiant barriers are far more valuable in hot climates than in cold ones, and that in northern regions it is usually more cost-effective to add more attic insulation first. That is not a knock on the technique. It is because winter heat loss through a ceiling is mostly conduction and convection, warm air finding its way up and out, and a radiant barrier does essentially nothing about that. If you have not already gone up and checked your insulation depth and your soffit and ridge ventilation the way we walked through in an earlier video, do that first. This is not a replacement for that work. It is the next layer, and it is specifically a summer tool aimed at the exact months when your attic turns into an oven and starts cooking the ceiling below it. Where a radiant barrier earns its keep is an attic that already has reasonable insulation but still runs unbearably hot in July and August, which describes a great many old northern farmhouses whose attics were built for a cold climate and never accounted for how brutal a prairie summer afternoon can get. Oak Ridge's research found something specific worth knowing here too. Adding a radiant barrier to an attic with weak insulation around R11 cut the cooling load by roughly 16%. Add that same barrier to an attic that is already well insulated, up around R30, and the additional benefit drops to something closer to 2%, because a well-insulated attic floor is already blocking most of that heat on its own. This is a fix for the specific problem of a hot attic radiating heat down into the rooms below it, not a general substitute for insulation depth. If you want to do this yourself, here is what it actually takes. One-sided radiant barrier foil runs somewhere around 10 to 25 cents a square foot, and a full roll for an average attic somewhere near 1,000 square feet of roof area lands you in the range of $150 to $200 total. Staple it to the underside of the rafters, foil side facing down into the open attic space, leaving the air gap between the foil and the roof deck that makes the reflection work. It is a two-person job in most attics. One person holding and stretching the material, the other running the staple gun, because working overhead in a hot attic with a single roll of foil is a good way to end up with it wrinkled and sagging instead of taut. Do not lay it directly against the roof deck. It needs that air gap to do its job, and foil in direct contact with wood loses most of its effectiveness. If you have ductwork running through the attic, prioritize that area first. The research showing the largest gains specifically involved attics, where ductwork sat exposed directly under a hot roof deck, soaking up radiant heat all day before it ever reached a single vent in the house. And covering that stretch of duct alone can be worth more than doing the rest of the attic. Now, why does a roofer rarely bring this up? It is not a conspiracy, and I do not think anyone is hiding anything from you. A roofing job is priced by the square foot of material installed. A $180 staple-up project with a thin margin on a roll of foil simply does not fit into either of those businesses the way a full re-roof or a spray foam job does. Nobody has to keep it a secret. It just never comes up in a conversation that starts with a much bigger bid already on the table. There is one more honest caveat worth knowing before you staple a single sheet, and it is specific to a cold climate, which makes it worth more here than almost anywhere else this gets talked about. Warm, moist air from the living space below can rise into the attic, and if that air hits the cool underside of a radiant barrier, it can condense there the same way it would on a cold window. Research into this found the risk is real, but limited to climates colder than roughly the Tennessee Valley, which puts every northern farmhouse squarely inside the zone where it is worth taking seriously. And it is not the radiant barrier itself causing the problem. It is warm, humid indoor air finding its way up through gaps in the ceiling in the first place. The fix is the same fix that solves half the problems in an old farmhouse attic. Seal the air leaks in the ceiling below, keep the soffit and ridge vents clear the way we already covered, and the moisture never gets up there to condense on anything. I want to be honest about the limits, too. This will not fix a house with genuinely inadequate attic insulation. It will not lower your winter heating bill in any meaningful way, and if somebody tells you it will, they are stretching the research past what it actually says. It also loses most of its value in an attic that already has ductwork or HVAC equipment properly sealed and insulated on its own. Since the research showing the biggest gains specifically involved attics with exposed ductwork sitting directly in that radiant heat. What it is genuinely good at is exactly what old farmhouse families needed it for, keeping an upstairs bedroom livable on the handful of weeks a year when a prairie summer turns an attic into a furnace. Old farmhouse families did not have the phrase radiant barrier, but the underlying idea, blocking radiant heat before it soaks into a living space, was not foreign to them either. It is the same principle behind whitewash, which went up on upper Midwest dairy barns as routine maintenance mostly for sanitation, but which also reflects a meaningful share of sunlight before it turns into heat. A family did not need the physics explained to notice that the whitewashed barn stayed cooler than the unpainted shed beside it. They just kept doing what worked, generation after generation, long before anyone measured exactly why. Go up into your own attic on the next hot afternoon, put your hand flat against the underside of the roof deck, and then check whether your insulation depth and your ventilation are actually doing their job before you spend a dime on foil. Tell me in the comments what you find up there and how your upstairs bedrooms handle the hottest week of your summer. My name is Walter Northwood. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing what old northern households actually did season by season, instead of a bigger bid than the problem calls for. And if you're the kind of person who checks the attic before you check your wallet, stay close because insulation and radiant heat were only two pieces of what kept these houses livable.